everyone. I'm Shivani Muthana from YourStory, and a very warm welcome to this panel discussion on boosting exports, where we will be talking about how e-commerce is blurring the lines and the boundaries between local and global. So just to set the context, until a decade back, exporting goods could be a tough task for small businesses in India, given their limited resources, strict regulatory guidelines, as well as the need for massive investment. Cut to today, the present, it's not uncommon anymore to see small brands from remote towns in India cater to customers across the globe, thanks to the power of e-commerce. In fact, according to a very recent KPMG report, the Indian e-commerce sector is projected to cross about $300 billion by the year 2030. And over the years, online marketplaces have indeed helped small and medium businesses soar to new heights by helping them leverage innovation via technology-driven solutions to also explore international platforms and markets. In fact, even when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and impacted businesses across the globe, we do know that e-commerce was among the sectors that managed to really turn the crisis into an opportunity and enable that much needed scale. Amazon, with over 1.5 lakh registered sellers, is among one of those online platforms that have indeed been an integral part of the Indian e-commerce sector's evolution over the past few years. So with that said, today we have with us an esteemed panel to really deep dive into how e-commerce platforms like Amazon are helping local brands get global visibility. So let me quickly introduce our panelists to you. We have with us Sandeep Juneja, who is VP Sales and Marketing at DHL Express India. Sandeep has over 27 years of experience and expertise in his domain. He successfully led DHL's penetration into large enterprises as well as small and medium businesses across industries and geographies. So welcome, Sandeep.
Thank you.
We also have with us Sabina Devan, founder and ED at Just Jobs Network. She's also a senior visiting fellow at the Center for Policy Research in India and a non-resident fellow at the Karsi School of Public Policy at University of New Hampshire. Hi, Sabina, welcome to the panel.
Hi, Shivani. Thank you for having me.
Nimisha Danda, co-founder at Dimoksha Homes. She's also on the panel with us today. In the past, she's worked with the big brands like Reliance Capital, HDFC Bank, and Warner Media. And in 2020, of course, amidst the pandemic, Nimisha launched her eco-friendly home decor brand Dimoksha after giving up a cushy corporate job. Welcome, Nimisha.
Thank you, Shivani. It's a pleasure to be here with other esteemed panelists.
And also from Amazon, we have Abhijit Kamra, Director of Global Trade, where he, of course, leads the global selling program in India for Amazon, which has over 60,000 Indian exporters selling made in India products to customers worldwide. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on the panel today and taking out the time to do so. Let's dive straight in to really getting the ball rolling. And to set the context a little more, let me come to you first, Abhijit, to get your perspective and overview on how this whole linkage between exports and e-commerce really stand. It is, of course, a very crucial linkage in our current times. So what is your real reading of the current scenario?
Thanks a lot, Shivani. Thanks for having me here. Good afternoon, everyone. Would love to thank all our panelists, Sabina, Nimisha, Sandeep, for joining us today for this discussion. Also thankful to all the audience who've dialed in this afternoon to watch this discussion. Hope you're all doing well in the middle of this pandemic. I think if I take a step back, right, the MSME sector in India is the backbone of our economy. Almost a third of all our economic domestic product, half of our exports, and a large part of employment is generated by the sector. So needless to say, we need to put a very deliberate effort in making this sector successful. I think one of the fascinating phenomena that has played out over the last decade in India is how technology, e-commerce, is helping connect supply and demand agnostic of the geographical separation that exists within the country. Now, you could have a business owner based out of the northern part of the country, which is able to cater to customers in the southern part of the country. And customers love it, right? At the end of the day, customers want products which are high quality, price competitive, and serve their needs. And this was a phenomenon that was playing out in India. And one of the thoughts that occurred to people within Amazon was that if Indian MSMEs whether it is brands, manufacturers, distributors, artisans, weavers, are producing such great quality products in our country. Why should this supply only be restricted to customers in India? And with that thought, we launched Global Selling, and just to realize that simple notion that if we are able to connect all this great supply to customers across the world, we've got hundreds of millions of loyal customers across 200 countries who shop on Amazon. And if you're able to connect that, right, and technology and Amazon and e-commerce and partners like DHL reduce the entry barriers for people to participate in this phenomena, we could truly build a large-scale economic movement based on exports. And then that's how it's played out over the last 4.5, 5 years. Today, we've got over 70,000 exporters who are associated with this program and span the length and breadth of this categories, right? Everything from age-old Ayurvedic products to STEM toys, consumer products, beauty. There are thousands and thousands of very interesting brands that are emerging out of India. And all of them are now getting access to these customers across the world. If I may, I think first time in the history of economy of our country, any Indian MSME, any brand owner can truly dream of building a global brand from day one while sitting in India. And that's today possible thanks to technology, e-commerce, and our partners. And I think that's what's given us confidence in this opportunity. And I think to put things in perspective, we've been doing this for almost 5 years now. If I was to look at $1 billion as a yardstick, so it took us 3 years to hit $1 billion of exports from India when we started. The next $1 billion happened in 18 months. And the last $1 billion has only taken 12 months. That kind of gives you a sense of the momentum. And all of this is because of the enterprising MSMEs that we have in the country. And consequently, we've taken a goal to enable $10 billion of exports from India by 2025. And we're very confident seeing the entrepreneurial spirit, the interesting products that are being manufactured in India and through our partners, that we should be able to realize that and truly help realize the Made in India dream that our Prime Minister has.
Sure, Abhijit, thanks for that. Really setting the context and where small and medium businesses really stand right now. Nicely put when you said that any small business owner sitting in a remote village in India can now have pan-India dreams, as well as also think of going global with their brand, thanks to companies such as yours, partners such as DHL, the entire logistics link coming in, as well as the entire Made in India dream that is going far and wide. So thanks for really setting that context for us. And coming to the rest of you on the panel as well, Sandeep, if I can start with you, and then to the rest of you as well, on what your experience has been in the past 1.5 years in terms of the scale that you managed to reach, the enablement that you managed to give to your partners as well. So has it been a really challenging process? Have you seen any opportunities, silver linings? How has this pandemic really affected your business, especially as a key player in enabling exports, Sandeep?
Okay, so I think the last 15 months, it's cliche to say now that everything has changed. But we have a line in DHL which says everything has changed, but nothing has changed. And I'll tell you why do we say that, right? So, but I'm just picking on, Abhijit said some very interesting statistics there, and he talked about how, let's say, Amazon, or let me take a step back, e-commerce makes the geographical location agnostic, right? So you can do business from virtually anywhere in India, and because you are on a platform. And so this is where this brings the DHL context in beautifully, how then DHL forms a bridge for you to trade with virtually any part of the world, right? So therefore, any part of you're agnostic of where customers are buying you from, right? So, and that's the bridge which beautifully allows anywhere in India to anywhere in the world, right? So, and so what is our context? Our context is that, and I'll stay in India, or globally for that matter, for the last 50 years, we've been enabling global trade. Global trade has really been creating opportunities for the whole world, so to say, driving prosperity in the world. From an Indian context, what is keeping Indian economy floating right now is the jump up in the demand by the global organizations, or the, let's say, global consumer demand, not really organization, but global consumer demand, which is keeping our economy going because exports are so powerful right now. Our domestic consumption is hit right now, right? So that is what we are enabling global trade. But how last 15 months been? Last 15 months have been very disruptive. But in our history, the way we work across the whole world, we have something or the other happening all the time, right? Either naturally or politically. I mean, just to remind you, in 2010, there was this Icelandic volcanic ash when aircrafts couldn't fly, and we are operating through aircrafts only, right? So, and we just couldn't fly anything at that time. It was so difficult. So how did we come out of that, right? Because we have to keep global supply chains running. And what happened this time was actually the mother of all disruptions. Corona is the mother of all disruptions, and it tested us really. And so look at supply chain. What happened really is that the demand globally, from a global movement standpoint, supply chain standpoint, fell down, let's say by 25-30% on an average. But the supply, which is the belly space available globally, fell down by 40 to 50%. So demand came down by 25-30%, but supply fell down by 50%. So that puts a lot of pressure on organizations which were still running. So we kept running, right? And therefore, what meant was, for the same pipeline, if I was conveying 100 liters of water, the same pipeline was now carrying 200 liters of water. So therefore, there was so much of business coming our way that we had to handle it. And it put a lot of pressure on us. And pandemic was a pandemic for us too, right? But I think the one thing that really kept us afloat through the whole period was and it sounds cliche to say it, but the reality is our unrelenting and our over focus. If there's a word called over focus on our people, on our practices, the way we were operating, on our processes. So therefore, the huge focus on people ensured that the people practices, the way we were bringing them to office, the way they were working, the vans they were running, the containers we were building, the way we were loading them on the aircraft, etc. All of that had to go to another level altogether in terms of sanitization quality, people around each other in terms of social distancing, all those concepts. But when you do social distancing and when you put all these sanitizations in your already tight cycles, and volumes are much higher than before because of demand supply gap that I explained to you, it puts a lot of pressure on people. And therefore our processes had to be re-engineered, right? Also meant that we had to scale up our facilities big time. So between people, processes, facilities, whole lot of demand coming in because of demand supply mismatch, I think we had a hell of a time, right? But I think if you look back in the last 15 months, it's been a roller coaster experience. And we, I think, have come out prouder. We have come out more digitalized. We have come out absolutely in flying colors. And our business, for instance, last year, our revenue numbers were the highest ever. We did about, in our division, which is DHL Express, about 19 billion euros globally, of which about 3 billion euros were profits, right? So our best ever revenues, our best ever profit, our toughest ever period, which really tested us. But I think what bigger test of a globalized world and a company which calls itself the most international company of the world, we were really put to test. So I think that sort of summarizes the last 15 months of experience, our learnings, and how we come out of it, right? So.
Sure, Sandeep, thanks for sharing that with us. Interesting to see how a large enterprise like yours really, tided over that crisis and came out winning and stronger. So now to really get a perspective from, a small and medium business owner, Nimisha, if I can bring you in now, to really get in your point of view as well, because it must have been challenging, in fact, even more challenging for you, because you started out on your own, left a cushy corporate job and, founded a company right in the middle of a pandemic. So what sort of made you do that? What gave you the backing to really, do that and make that bold move? How have the recent few months been for you?
Yeah. Thank you, Shivani. So I think when we launched Demoksha Home last year in March 2020 on Amazon.com, we were very clear that we wanted to build a global brand from India. And we are committed to spread delight with our socio-conscious home fashion brand. And that is the whole objective behind, launching this. So in fact, if you look at our products, we offer the finest handcrafted home linens, and we use only eco-friendly and sustainable fabrics like linen, hemp, lyocell. And this entire idea, of leaving a corporate job and getting into it actually started almost 3.5 years back when Manav and I, who's my co-founder and also a husband, we had actually moved into a new house and we wanted to do it up our way. And our son Moksh was about to born. And that was the time the seed was sown, because when we started looking in the market for sustainable home linens, we realized that there is actually brevity of such options in the market. And, that's how the seed was sown. And over the next 2 years, we actually did a lot of research, which further made us believe in the opportunity globally. And finally, we took the leap out of our comfort zone and started Demoksha Homes. So, we were very excited with the thought of starting up, but we didn't know that we have actually got a ticket for a roller coaster ride. I say this because not only we were facing the usual startup challenges, but we were in a completely uncharted territory. We had no knowledge of, textile or manufacturing or exports or e-commerce. And if all this was not enough, within the first sale on Amazon.com, within the first few days of our first sale on Amazon.com, the entire nation went for a lockdown. And globally, we know what happened. So we had no network in the industry. Supply chain was completely broken down, from raw material to manufacturing to logistics to shipping. I think it was a very, very difficult period for us. We somehow managed to retain one migrant karigar with us, and we restarted our manufacturing literally actually from a slum room just behind our house. And because there was no option at that point in time, there was no commercial place open. And in the recent few months, however, we've seen things improving. We actually witnessed a 30% month-on-month growth in the first year. We also achieved profitability. In fact, we are very proud of two things, because we're in a very early stage, right? So we are very proud of two things. One is that we are actually a tax-paying company in the first year of operations. And the second point, which is even more important to us, is that every employee that we have was jobless because of the pandemic, And we feel that all this didn't happen by chance. A couple of things actually worked in our favor. And the first one is that we had that absolute belief to make it happen, come what may. And I completely agree with Sandeep's point that we have that resilient attitude, right? And that only can hold you during such unprecedented times. So I think that was one, that we had that absolute belief that we'll make it happen. And the other is to have a platform like Amazon.com, which helped us keep the business rolling when everything was disrupted globally. And business-wise, I feel that after a year, all this is now summing up into a closure of our first fundraise. It's a seed round, but we are very humbled to have a fantastic, list of angels who are placing faith in our business. So, here on, we think that we are now hopping off the roller coaster and getting onto a jet.
Sure, Nimisha, and thanks so much for really sharing that startup journey with us. It's clearly not been easy for you, but you have sort of overcome all those challenges. And really, congratulations on that seed round of funding. Like you mentioned, most of the people that you employed were also rendered jobless because of the pandemic. So, taking that point forward and coming to you on that, Sabina, because on the panel today, we're of course talking about enablement. We're talking about, helping SMBs scale, job creation, and all of that. And India, of course, has seen two waves of the pandemic now. The last one, of course, was very hard to really overcome. What is your view of how it has impacted SMBs and people associated with them? What is the sentiment out there in the job market, and where do we really go from now?
Well, thank you for that excellent question, Shivani. And Nimisha's story is, of course, very, very heartening. I think, let me contextualize the discussion around small and medium enterprises and the pandemic a little bit. As Abhijit noted, and we hear policymakers, economists, scholars constantly assert the importance of small and medium enterprises to the economy and their particular role in job creation. But in India, the small business ecosystem has been fraught with challenges for quite some time now. And firms, especially small firms, struggle to access electricity. They struggle to access capital, to access markets, some of which we're hearing about. And this, and to top it all off, there's a very complex system of non-labor compliances. Again, I underline that in red, non-labor compliances that really constrain small businesses. As a result, what we see is that even before the pandemic, just under about 70% of India's firms remained unregistered, and 99% of our businesses are unorganized. And what I mean about that is, that they're less than 20 workers. So now, of course, against the backdrop of a pandemic, you have a huge exacerbation of all of these challenges for small businesses. Many of these businesses do not have working capital or did not have working capital to sustain their businesses during the lockdowns. Many did not have the capacity to withstand the drop in aggregate demand resulting from the pandemic. So it becomes kind of a vicious cycle, because as people lose their jobs, they have less money to spend. As they spend less, it affects businesses and particularly small businesses that don't have those kinds of savings and don't have the kind of working capital. And then you take away their market access. It creates a vicious cycle, and we see many businesses, small businesses, collapse, which of course then has a cascading effect on jobs. So aside from those that lose their jobs because small businesses close, there are also workers that see their wages delayed, or even worse, their wages cut. And so this creates a vicious cycle. Now, of course, in order to address these challenges, and as I mentioned, these challenges existed prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic has just sort of put them on steroids and made it that much worse. Now, we need to systematically consider how to aid our small businesses, including enabling the access to capital, simplifying the non-labor compliance frameworks, enabling access to markets. And that's where I think e-commerce becomes an important part of the picture. And we know that all of these changes that the pandemic is inducing is also against the backdrop of rapidly advancing technology, right? So with the advancement of technology, against the backdrop of tremendous pain to small businesses and therefore to workers, there is an opportunity here to consider how e-commerce can facilitate access to markets through the use of platforms and through the use of technology. Now, there are things that we need to be mindful of, which I'll hopefully address in the next question, but I'll pause there for now, Shivani.
Sure, Sabina, and thanks for really laying it out there, as it is when it comes to small and medium businesses, the challenges really that they were faced with, a lot of them rendered jobless, a lot of them facing manufacturing issues and all of that. So Abhijit, coming to you on that, because you closely deal with a lot of the exporters, a lot of the sellers. So how has business been for you on that front in the midst of the COVID pandemic? How did you really rise to it? And what has been your experience in enabling them through all of this?
Thanks, Shivani. I think fascinating set of points laid out by Sandeep, Nimisha, and Sabina. I'm going to build on that a little bit. if I were to look at pre-COVID, right, and COVID is obviously this black swan that all of us have dealing with, right? Pre-COVID, now, if you need to build a large export-oriented business from India, like a large-scale movement with a lot of people participating, what are the broad contours to do it, right? The first one, I feel, is market intelligence. Consumer demand patterns across the world are different. How do manufacturers get access to that data, right? So what are demand patterns? So market intelligence. Second is market access. If you look at the offline way of exporting, right, the way that world works is there are trade fairs across the world. There's a home trade fair in New York, right? So if you're a home manufacturer, you buy a ticket, you go to that New York trade fair, you buy a booth, you display your products. If you get an order, you come back, manufacture samples, send it back, and if it gets selected, you manufacture. So look at the entry barrier, right? The third thing is, after you've created these products, like Sabina said, where do you get the capital to manufacture it, right? Now, let's assume you've manufactured it. How do you get the logistics to ship it, right? It's not easy booking containers if you are a small scale business who's just getting started. Finally, you've dealt with all of that. How do you deal with cross-border remittances, right? So if you think about it, there's like at least 5 pressure points across the journey of a small entrepreneur building a global brand. So pre-COVID, the pursuit has been very simple. That how do you use technology to simplify all of this? So we've got a lot of data. How do you build a machine learning algorithm and crystallize out market trends for North America, for Europe, for Japan, all of which are different, right? And then and share it with manufacturers in a way that they can act on it. Similarly, how do you solve for market access by creating an account online the same way you would create a Facebook account in 5 minutes on your mobile phone in a low internet bandwidth location in a vernacular language, right? So I think the meta point I'm trying to make is that the phenomenon of exports, and specifically at large scale, needs to be enabled by solving these pressure points. Now, while all of this was playing out, along comes COVID, right, which disrupted life in a way never expected, right? But there are 2 very fundamental economic changes that also happened while all of these challenges were going on. One is demand moved online in a big way, right? And it looks like it's staying, right? Because people have got used to the convenience of online, right? So all the exporters who had exposure to online channels were able to hedge their business in a big way. So to your point, exporters who were partnering with us during the pandemic, right? Because of demand shifting, like firsthand, multiple exporters that work with us have spoken to them, and 9 out of 10 of them have come back sharing stories that by having exposure to online commerce, they were able to pay their workforce through the pandemic, right? Now that's large scale socioeconomic impact, right? A nuance within this was demand for certain categories skyrocketed. Everything to do with nutrition, well-being, things that you need at home, toys, for example. Nobody is able to think of toys as an allied category or home products as an allied category with COVID. But given that the entire world is staying at home and there are kids at home and there's no school, people need good toys to keep their children engaged. So STEM toys took off, right? So all the exporters who had exposure to these categories continue to do really well. The second large economic phenomena I think that's happened is it has made the virtue of diversification very, very evident to everyone. So when I contextualize it for COVID, when North America had the worst COVID wave and everything was shut down, Europe was doing okay, India was doing okay. And then when we were in the middle of the second wave, North America was bouncing back, right? So exporters who had access to all these different markets, right? So when India was doing okay, there was revenue coming in from the Indian market, right? And supply chains were working. When North America was doing okay and India was shutting down, you were getting revenue from North America. So from that standpoint, it in a very big way has also illustrated the dimension of hedging in your business, and specifically if there is technology and e-commerce which is helping you create these diversified business lines which allow you to get the fundamental hedge. So I think all of these things were playing out, but at the heart of it, it was just the resilience of people. It was the resilience of the MSMEs, the exporters, our partners in supply chain, our partners in payments, financial services, who had the grit and determination to keep these supply chains and these businesses running. But the sum total of it was that during the pandemic, exports using e-commerce from Amazon grew significantly over the last year-on-year basis. So yeah, but these were all the contours of why it played out that way.
Sure, Bitit, thanks so much for really sharing those insights and highlighting how a platform and marketplace such as Amazon, of course, enabled all the sellers through technology, through innovation, and kept them going through such an unprecedented crisis, really. And as you pointed, very insightful there on how hedging your business across geographies, across pan-India could really help in the long run, and maintain a resilient business as well at the end of the day, a pandemic proof, so to speak, in a certain sense. And coming to you, Nimisha, if I can get your personal experience as well, because you are of course listed on Amazon. So what has your experience been? Why did you choose e-commerce? You're of course a digital native. You launched in the midst of COVID-19. So what's your experience been like working with a giant e-commerce platform?
So Shivani, first I'll answer your question, why e-commerce? Yeah. So imagine every single time zone in the world, right? And billions of people who can potentially be accessed digitally through e-commerce sitting right here in India, no matter where you are. So just reiterating what Abhijit already said, that geographies do not matter anymore, right? So as far as we are concerned, it's not why e-commerce, it's why not e-commerce, right? And we actually live in a world where political boundaries exist and they might exist forever. But when you look at business wise, business boundaries have completely diminished and they don't exist anymore. So if you are an entrepreneur, there is no better time than now, where the world is your playing field. And when you have an aspiration, a dream like ours to build a global Indian brand, there can't be any better possible partner on this planet than Amazon. And I'll tell you why, from a seller perspective, from a brand perspective. See, for anybody who comes to Amazon, either they are experts who are already there, but for any new brand or seller who are not from e-commerce background, this is the most important point that I can share with them. So the reality is that we had absolutely no background in e-commerce or any kind of marketplace altogether, And if I have to turn the clock back and think to do this all over again without the presence of Amazon, it would have been practically impossible, because there are far too many moving parts, which Abhijit had already highlighted. And from a seller perspective also, if you understand, there are too many things that must come together to make your sale happen, and not only your sale happen, but to also make the entire customer experience an elevating one, right? And see, assuming that your product is already in place, right? Still, there are so many moving parts, and the obvious ones would be, at least from our perspective, how do you export it? How do you export your goods out of India? Finding the shipping and logistic partners, getting into the US, right? And then making it reach the warehouse. Once it reaches the warehouse, then dispersing it across multiple warehouses over there, so that you can manage the fastest possible deliveries, right? And having tools not just to manage the listing and marketing, but actually make your goods move and reach the last mile customer. And in case of returns, to even put it back in the inventory, or even managing taxes at a state level. If the list only sounds so cumbersome, you can imagine that how cumbersome it is in reality. I can go on with this, right? And all this is possible on a single dashboard of Amazon at extremely viable cost, and which is, absolutely incredible. And imagine now, if we were to go to a different marketplace and try to make it happen, even after having an experience, the same process, I'm telling you from our perspective also, the same process can be 10 times more cumbersome, especially for a small business. And that is one part of it, Shivani, that where you have a great platform which is enabling sellers. But the second point, which I think personally we witnessed, and it's extremely important for us, is the support from the global selling team in India. So we've been working very, very closely with them, and they're extremely structured, from onboarding new sellers to managing them to a certain level of sales, supporting them, and also, helping them find answers to plethora of doubts as a new seller. And trust you me, we had many of them. So we used to bug them a lot with all the doubts and questions all the time, right? But the personalization and the care with which they take interest in every seller is absolutely incredible. The team is extremely receptive to our feedback on the processes, on the impaneled vendors, any ground level issues that we are facing. So, they're actually working like our partners. And mind you, I want to mention this, that when we started off and even now, our scale is much smaller, than the scale of big exporters from India. But the service that we get as a small business and what we've been getting from Amazon team makes us actually feel like a 5-star seller. So this actually pays back to the entire culture of Amazon, where they really value not just the customer, but each and every seller who comes on board.
Sure, Nimisha, great to see that you've had such a wonderful experience on Amazon, and that you've been able to build value creation in spite of being in your first year of operations, and that you sort of get all these services under one roof. So thanks for that. And coming back to you, Abhijit, I think Nimisha validated a lot of the points that you made earlier, but we've also seen reports that you have a target of enabling or looking at the figure of about $10 billion in sales by the year 2025. So what really are the various things that Amazon is doing to really achieve this goal?
At the heart of it is, I think what Nimisha said, I think it's, so for us, right, the MSMEs, the exporters are our customers. It's actually just listening to them very carefully and working with one simple premise that we need to create an ecosystem where the exporters and MSMEs should focus only on doing what they do best, which is manufacture great quality products. All the other heavy lifting around everything that I talked about, market access, intelligence, customer experience, fulfillment, supply chain, payments, compliance, that should be taken care of by either us or our partners, leveraging technology so that it's scalable. And at every point, like if we could go point by point, like everything from, let's say, fulfillment, right now, which is very, very complex. Every customer in the world wants fast delivery, right? Now, if Nimisha has her products in India, doesn't matter what kind of supply chain we build, right? And then we can sit in Sandeep's office all day and request him to move mountain and earth. But the bottom line is, it's going to take time for products to go from India to US if the customer is sitting in California, right? So how do you design a product? Like, for example, in this case, we've opened all our fulfillment centers to MSMEs from India. So they can use our warehouses in the US to leverage, to ship to customers. So which means when we sit down with Sandeep, we take help to move goods from India to these warehouses, but the warehouses where customer orders are placed, right? So then we can ship those products to customers in less than a day, right? Now, an MSME from India can go get their own warehousing, but it's expensive. So all of this is now variabilized from a cost structure standpoint. So if an MSME is storing one product for one day, we charge them for one product for one day. So I think the fundamental premise is make it simpler, make it easier, reduce the cost structure barriers, reduce the friction, and let just supply and demand kind of reach each other efficiently, and then the magic happens.
Sure, Vijit, and talking about, magic happening, Sandeep, I think DHL and what you do at the company, of course, is really that crucial link, that relationship between logistics and e-commerce and the customer experience at the end of the day. That, of course, is becoming increasingly more relevant now in the context of e-commerce exports and, the whole social distancing way of life, where speed, of course, is also of essence at the end of the day. So how are you sort of dealing with all of this? And tell us about this relationship and how you're really enabling it further.
Extremely inspired to listen to you, Nimisha. Thank you very much for being on the show. And I'm so happy to note that while I've perpetually been for the last 27 years on a roller coaster, you already moved on to a jet, right? So that's some speed. I'm extremely impressed. And the other point that I noticed about you is that in the truest sense of the word, you are a satisfied user of services, and how a satisfied user can turn into a brand ambassador. And therefore, this encourages organizations like us to have satisfied users, because then they become brand ambassadors. And you right now spoke so well about, and you are truly a brand ambassador in that sense, right? So good to hear you. All right. So linking logistics and customer experience, right? So by my background, I'm an engineer MBA, right? So, and the first organization where I stayed for 11 years was an engineering company, okay, which was selling products. And then I moved to DHL, so it's been nearly 17 years, and therefore, which is logistics. So I thought, yeah, it'll be easy, right? Products to logistics, moving one thing from point A to point B, but I was terribly wrong. And this is where the difference between products and services come in. Yeah, the 4 Ps in products go up to 7 Ps when it comes to marketing of services. And the very important P is something like, let's say, process, right? So what happens in services is that consumers or our customers or users are part of a manufacturing cycle, right? So if you buy a mobile, Shivani and Sabina, Abhijit, Nimisha, you know that the mobile has been manufactured in a factory. It's been quality tested. And when it leaves the plant, it's ship shape certified for quality. But what happens in our case, when we pick up a shipment from Nimisha's office and we are taking it to Amazon warehouse in California, when we pick it up, is when we start manufacturing our product, which is a DHL service. And Nimisha starts experiencing my manufacturing the moment I pick it up. As I customs clear, she's experiencing. As I carry, she's experiencing. If something goes wrong, she's experiencing. When I deliver, I've delivered my product, but she has been a part of the manufacturing cycle of my product. And that's what really complicates a service. And logistics is a service, right? So customer is a part of my manufacturing cycle, right? So therefore, it's very, very, very complex, right? So that's sort of telling how complex is it when it comes to delivering customer experience, when it comes to selling a service, right? Okay, so let's look at sort of B2B, B2C for a second. So look at B2B, right? In my career, as I started, and I've been in sales and marketing for a very long time, I saw that all logistics people used to sit in the basement of offices, along with the procurement guys, by the way. But over a period of time, logistics people started sitting in the boardrooms, and that became a CXO role. So that tells you how important logistics is to any organization, not only to make it efficient in terms of cutting costs, but also to deliver the customer experience, right? So today you have chief supply chain officers in the best organization because it's become a boardroom job, right? So that's how important logistics is. But when we are servicing businesses, these chief supply chain officers know how to set expectations in a global, complex environment. When we're working with 220 countries, different customs rules, paperwork needed, export, import, duty drawbacks, and this is so complex, right? And I'm saying only logistics domain, but the organizations are learned and they know how to tackle these. The moment I shift the paradigm to e-commerce, and you're servicing a consumer who's waiting for a watch that he shopped on Amazon, or somebody's in US is waiting for an Indian sari that they bought from India. Oh, they are very anxious, right? Anxiety is number one, right? And therefore, how do you service this kind of a relationship when my daughter is waiting for something to arrive? She's checking the Amazon app every 2 hours. Oh, where is my shipment now, right? So in that scenario, how do you offer services and improve customer experience? So you must have heard the line saying, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. But the fact of the matter is, the simple is often more harder than complex. Simple is often more harder than complex. So design simple solutions. It is a very complex, harder than complex cycle, design simple solutions. But I think over a period of time, what we've done is that we've been able, and quite like what Abhijit was saying, because you're listening to what market's saying, because you have thinking minds within your own organization, you're able to connect bridges and develop solutions. And I'll name a couple of them. One from the seller perspective. Let's say you're a seller in India. We've been able to configure over a period of time that there are many solutions, exporting solutions, which the sellers, if they use, they're able to leverage the government schemes on exports, which unlocks a lot of benefits like duty drawbacks, MEIS, etc., etc. And surprise, surprise, many of these sellers were not leveraging these solutions. But today, because we are building solutions like this, they're able to leverage these solutions and still enjoy the de minimis benefits in the other countries. So I can only tell so much, but these are solutions we built for sellers. For consumers, because finally, when the seller sells to a final consumer, it's the consumer satisfaction which drives the seller's business. So there are solutions we built now. It's today live in 170 countries. Therefore, it's a very large scalable solution. Wherein if you're shipping to millions and millions of buyers across the world, that buyer, with a simple click onto a solution called on-demand delivery, can select delivery options. And he can select delivery options such as, look, I'm on a vacation. Can you keep it for 30 days and deliver it to me? Look, this place falls on my way to the office. I'll be not at home. Can I collect from the closest DHL place? Or, hey, you can drop it to my neighbor's door. Or, I don't need to authorize a signature for receipt. You just drop it on my door and go. Solutions like this. But the moment you design it for millions and millions of consumers, that's where scalability comes in. And this we did on the feedback that, logistics is the biggest pain point for consumers, right? So how do we simplify the life of consumers? So I gave an example of how we simplified life of the seller by making their businesses more profitable, and how we're simplifying the life of a consumer by offering solutions as on-demand delivery and a few more. But I hope I've made my point on how do you link logistics, which is so complex, make it simpler, which is even more complex, and link it with customer experience.
Sure, Sandeep, thanks for really explaining that to us with so much, detail and all those use cases. So keeping it simple, of course, is the way to go. And we've spoken so much about how to build a relationship, what is crucial, technology-driven solutions, innovation, and all of that to enable a small and medium businesses to really scale pan-India and go global. And Sabina, I want to come back to you on a very foundational question, really, when it comes to the point of from where we're creating that value, the value creation in terms of entrepreneurship, which is at the heart of small and medium businesses, exports and job creation. How are you seeing all of this evolve right now?
Thank you, Shivani, for that question. And as you rightly pointed out, my job here is to contextualize this discussion in a broader discourse of development, job creation, and the potential solutions that we have to this enormous job challenge that we're confronting now, particularly in the aftermath of the pandemic. So in that spirit, let me make a few comments. So I think when it comes to entrepreneurship in our country, we need to recognize that not all entrepreneurs are created equal, right? 48% of our workforce is self-employed, but it's critical to note that not all self-employment is entrepreneurship. Many of our self-employed workers are actually just survivalists trying to make ends meet. And Abhijit mentioned that he noted the importance of market intelligence, market access to capital, logistics, cross-border remittances, and everything that we need in order to enable small businesses and entrepreneurs to build a global brand. But I think we would do e-commerce a disservice if we lumped all our businesses in the same category, right? We need to be very clear that e-commerce and other forms of online work as well are critical and have emerged as a very important alternative to cater to consumer demand and create and sustain some jobs during this crisis period, and will continue to do so even when the crisis subsides. So there is, I believe, some behavioral change. So we're looking at a sort of sustainable trajectory for this kind of e-commerce that we're seeing, and more consumers ordering online and so on. But let's also be clear that this is not a panacea for all the employment challenges confronting our economy at the moment. And if we adopt a very pragmatic backdrop, then we can actually hone in on what kinds of businesses e-commerce is a successful solution for. And here, I think Nimisha is the best example, because she is obviously a very articulate, very well-spoken, but well-educated, entrepreneur with a tremendous amount of grit and hustle, right? Which is everything that you need in addition to all that Amazon has done in terms of hand-holding. You need a certain kind of person, a certain kind of business who can leverage this opportunity. And if we want to see e-commerce be successful and explore the viability of e-commerce as a successful solution for our economy, then let's be very clear with our policymakers. Let's be very clear with our scholars and businesses about, what confluence of factors it takes to actually leverage this opportunity. So with that, Shivani, my two important messages here are, we need to be mindful of the kind of entrepreneur that this is a viable option for. And then we need to look at what is the appropriate e-commerce framework to enable small businesses to avail this opportunity, avail markets abroad, make use of market intelligence, and while maintaining autonomy over things like pricing and so on. And lastly, e-commerce operates it doesn't operate in a bubble, it operates in an economy. So we need to also look at what other kind of infrastructural services and hard and soft infrastructure we need to build in order to actually be able to leverage the e-commerce opportunity successfully.
Sabina, thanks for breaking it down so well for us, and really taking that point forward on how you could leverage e-commerce and the various options and things that it enables for us. Taking that forward, Abhijit, if you can come in on how e-commerce and why e-commerce is really looked at as an essential element or aspect in enabling and boosting exports from India at this point in time.
I'll kind of build on what Sabina said in terms of being focused on where e-commerce can solve problems, and B, I think making it a large-scale inclusive movement. So I think every time, and I feel a lot of it comes down to be a large-scale movement with a lot of people participating. And the beauty of multiple businesses participating is that they then have a cascading impact and they create more jobs. And there's overall economic prosperity that's created because of that. So I think it fundamentally comes down to reducing entry barriers. Reducing entry barriers and friction at every point of the value chain, right? And then why e-commerce can probably do that is because fundamentally it's making the value chain more efficient. There are no middlemen anymore, right? All the things that are distractions from the core business of manufacturing good export-oriented products are taken care by either technology or by people who are specialized to do that. Three, there is aggregation of demand and supply, which leads to volume, and volume and scale leads to efficiency. So I think for all of those reasons, e-commerce is driving more efficiency. And hence at a fundamental level, I think the economies of this value chain eventually are going to be so efficient, right? And then as you keep putting more volume into an efficient machine, it's going to become a flywheel, and that flywheel is going to benefit everybody who's associated with it, whether it is going to be ecosystem partners, it's going to be MSMEs who are going to get more volume, better profitability, better realization on ROIs, or customers who are now going to get products which otherwise they did not have access to, and at more competitive rates. So I just feel that those are the reasons that probably e-commerce could prove as a catalyst for exports from our country at this point of time.
Sure, Abhijit, the point taken as well on how it really sort of enables the entire ecosystem, while you're working with exports on one end, but it also sort of creates that flywheel to carry everyone along with you. And Sandeep, if you could go into detail in particular about how you are customizing solutions to address MSMEs and startups and the entire community that is really looking to set up export businesses. What really are you doing from your end?
Wonderful co-panelists. There are many points that I was thinking that they've already spoken. For instance, I'll pick on what Abhijit said earlier, but that's an important statistic, right? That 40% of Indian exports are done by SMEs in India. Of course, they generate a huge employment number in India. But so is the story globally. So you go anywhere in between 40 to 60% is what they contribute to the economy, or let's say exports or global trade whatsoever. But you come closer to where DHL is, and I'll share a number with you. About 70% plus of our business comes from SMEs, right? So SMEs are really powering our business, and we are therefore naturally we have to be building ourselves around SME needs, and very simple things, but very powerful. For instance, you call up most of the places, voicemail picks up the phone and directs you, dial 1, dial 2, dial 3. But our promise to our customers is that when you call up the DHL customer service, we will pick up your phone in less than 3 rings. Well, that's a huge promise. Yeah? And when we pick up your phone, a warm voice welcomes you. And in most cases, tells you when, let's say, Shivani, you were to call up, hi, Shivani, how are you doing today? Well, that's huge, right? That means I have to have that many number of people in my customer service department. And that is the promise that I'm monitoring all the time, that I will pick up your phone in less than 3 rings, right? And when I personalize, and when I identify who you are, that's a huge plus and a huge differentiation. But whenever you call DHL, somebody picks up the phone quickly and calls you by your name. And in most cases, knows why you're calling, because there's a detailed case history which comes up when your phone number flashes on my screen. So that's technology. That's the intent, which is now getting shown in the way we work, the ways of working. Yeah? But it doesn't stop there. I gave you one small example, but right from how I capture your customs requirements in terms of clearance requirements. And then once your material moves from one country to the other, my systems take over and I'm able to customize what you need in terms of customs clearance. Stuff like when I'm able to offer you digital solutions for duties and taxes, etc., etc., etc. Because one of the P's of marketing of services, which I did not talk about, is people. Because when you deal with services, you don't deal with a product which is quality tested, but you deal with hundreds of touch points in an organization. Every touch point has to therefore be giving you that quality of service, which is very complex. So I think that is what we offer to SMEs. And I can talk about price and this and that, but at the end of the day, you know what? People say price, price, price. But fact of the matter is, when the rubber hits the road, what people want is quality, 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 because that's what sustains their business in the long term. Price, yes, but what they want is quality. So to build quality, when you're dealing with hundreds and thousands of SMEs at each touch point, I think is a challenge. So there is a generic approach as an organization that we have towards hundreds and thousands of customers. But there are some specific things, if I may mention 2 or 3, from an e-commerce standpoint also when we talk about SMEs. So we have a solution called TAS, which is Trade Automation Services. So when I'm shipping from India and I'm shipping to hundreds of countries, but I want to know the landed cost. You see, my product costs $50, but when my customer buys it, the customer pays duties, local taxes, etc., etc. How do I calculate these for so many countries? Right? So if you link up with a TAS solution, you know that what is the landed cost for your customer. So that's a solution for SMEs. Then right now, a big change is happening in the global trade arena, which is, if you've been noticing, we call it 222 exit, which is Europe has gone on to ICS 2.0. They want every exporter to send an invoice which is ICS 2.0 compliant. Europe has removed the de minimis of 22 euros per VAT. And similarly, Brexit has their own rules. And to make matters more complex, just on the anvil, China has proposed similar configurations for exporting to China. So has Indonesia, so has Thailand, and there are many more to come because the world is becoming a more compliant and regulated place. I picked up the word compliance from what Abhijit said, but all this means that the world is becoming more complex. Yeah. So how do we make it more simple, right? So if you go to a DHL shipping tool, and if you just follow the workflow in the DHL shipping tool, it automatically prepares you to be an ICS2 compliant, VAT22 compliant, and prepares you for what's going to come up in China, what's needed in the US. I mean, that's a huge relief. So how do I become compliant when I'm exporting to so many countries? Dear SME, just follow the workflow in the shipping process. I mean, this is exactly what Amazon is doing, right? Nimisha talked about a dashboard. So we make it that simple, and then you become very, very compliant. I think that's the only way that you become beneficial or supportive to SMEs. Not to forget, if I may repeat something which I said earlier, this is about developing supply chain solutions so that SMEs in India can leverage the export incentives, which I think many of them are missing out, and more stuff like that. I hope I answered your question, Shivani.
Sure, Sandeep, and if I can really sum that up, I think, from what you said, is the little big things that matter at the end of the day. Be process driven, be data driven, and, offer all of that by simple means for the customer to sort of really quickly take it up and enable them. So thanks for that, Sandeep. Closing comments from the rest of the panelists as well. Nimisha, if you can also tell us, you've sort of put your best foot forward now and been a victim of the fire, so to speak. So what would you give in terms of advice or key pointers that SMBs must keep in mind before going the e-commerce way and taking up exports as well in a big way?
So Shivani, while I feel I'm no expert here, but from my experience over the last year, I would just like to highlight a few things. That it's very, very important to know yourself, what is your objective and drive. For example, even on Amazon, we've observed that there are two kinds of sellers, right? One is commodity driven and the other one is very focused on building their brands, right? So you have to choose your path and be very, very clear from the beginning of your objective, right? And second is, I feel that you have to understand the tools, then only you'll be able to use it. So really educate yourself about all the e-commerce export tools that are available before hitting the market, And another point which I feel is very important, that while Amazon, it really makes the entire selling process easy, you have to understand that it makes it easy for all the sellers across the globe, right? So you are now competing not only against the radius of sellers that were there in your state or nation, but you're competing against the best possible minds in the category across the globe. So you have to be ready to brace that challenge, and compete with the global sellers and brand. So, and just come what may, be prepared to, make it work in the long run. And another very technical point I want to highlight, I think already Sandeep and Abhijit have highlighted, but I think for all new sellers, it's very important that please acquaint yourself with all the processes of legalities and compliance. It might sound very technical, but it is extremely important. There are a lot of Amazon impaneled, agencies. Identify the right one before you launch your business. And lastly, I would just want to say that, create your own playbook and go by it, because while there are platforms, and there is a platform as brilliant as Amazon and tools available for your benefit, but tools don't create success. They are enablers to the story that you want to write. So all the best, everyone.
Thank you so much, Nimisha, for all of that motivation and very interesting points, and bits of advice that you sort of put out there. Sabina, any closing comments from you as well in terms of what you would tell budding entrepreneurs or people who want to start up their own SMBs at this point in time and really carve a niche for themselves?
I mean, I would make a couple of more general points. I mean, I think from a nationwide perspective, there is a huge opportunity for India to expand the value, expand its exports. There's a lot more we could be doing. And I think that e-commerce, and against the backdrop of the pandemic and the technological advancements that we're witnessing, I think e-commerce presents an opportunity for us to better leverage exports. And so I think we do need to look at that carefully, and we do need to emphasize that. At the same time, I think we need to be very pragmatic and very centered in how we see e-commerce playing out, how we see competitive practices across businesses, how we see our policymakers adopting regulation that both facilitates e-commerce and the opportunity that it offers, while at the same time ensuring the best for our businesses and for our workers. And as far as individual entrepreneurs go, I think Nimisha is probably a much better advisor than I, but I would say, hustle, grit, appetite for calculated risks, a lot of hard work, sweat and tears. I am also an entrepreneur, so a different kind, not leveraging the e-commerce opportunity like you, but entrepreneurship is not hard, but it's not easy. It's a hard road to follow, but it's extremely fulfilling, and being in a position to avail opportunities presented to us. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Sure, Sabina. On that note, I think, we'll wrap it up on the panel. We've had a very engaging panel discussion. And of course, we have come to the conclusion that the opportunity is huge. We have many tools of enablement, many platforms, many services, Amazon, DHL, and of course, budding entrepreneurs, such as the two of you, Sabina and Nimisha as well, representations of that. So of course, the world is out there for the taking. And hopefully this motivates and inspires a lot of SMEs and entrepreneurs as well. I hope the audience enjoyed the way the panelists delved into the various aspects of exports and how it is really nurturing an ecosystem of entrepreneurs. It was really intriguing to know about how multiple stakeholders are really working cohesively to help brands leverage e-commerce opportunities and get that much needed global exposure. So thank you very much to all of you for taking out the time, sharing your thoughts with us. Take care, stay safe and stay healthy.